Koumei's new augment shows the fundamental design flaws of the augment system. Koumei, the marionette of fate, the high roller, and the frame with the 150-second cooldown on her best ability. Koumei was the 50th Warframe released on October 2nd, 2024, to the most polarizing mixed reviews the community has ever seen. No frame in the history of the game has come out to such a mixed and divisive reception. On one hand, you have creators claiming that she is the best frame, hands down, due to the implementation of the decree system from Duviri into the base game. Others say she's fighting for bottom 5 and is no better than a max rank secondary encumber. To everyone's credit, there really isn't much that they're saying that's wrong about the frame. The potential this frame has to easily be the best weapons platform in the entire game is there. However, it will take you about 2 hours to complete all her decrees. Actually, quick little correction. That was assuming the 45 decrees are standalone. You get every single different one on their own. Each of these decrees have upwards of 5 tiers. You actually can get way more. This will take upwards of 5 hours, not 2, assuming that you're completing the challenges in about a minute or less. On the other hand, her abilities can hit like wet noodles, and they do so often it's not even funny. Some are misunderstood, but one in particular is the most contentious. I mentioned it earlier, but Koumei's decree system is fundamentally flawed. Okay, before I even get to Koumei's decree system, we need to talk about the Duviri system. For every single decree that you get 15% more damage and 50 more base health in Steel Path. It doesn't matter if the decree you choose isn't perfect, isn't rare, or isn't even a cursed decree. You get this buff regardless, and it stacks indefinitely. And the more important factor is the fact that you can actively choose the decree you get. This alone makes the decree system extremely strong. This makes an imperfect, unoptimized, and below average build somewhat viable even up to level cap. Okay, first I need to go over what is the actual issue with her decree system. For one, you can't choose them. Not being able to choose your decrees is like getting hit in the knees with a bat for one run and getting potentially roided out the next. The randomness in the system is supposed to be a part of her design since she, well, is the Fate frame. I can let this flaw slide as it's still an exciting part of her kit that fits the theming. However, many people find this to be a major issue. Another issue with her decree system is that they handicapped her further by not giving her access to all the Duviri decrees. Out of the roughly 70 decrees, she only has access to about 45 of them. Many of the decrees are very beneficial to Koumei's kit, including Close Contagion, which foes inflicted with the status effect have a 50% chance to spread that status effect to enemies within 10 meters. If you get this decree when playing Koumei and Duviri, it alone will carry you to around level 2000, spamming her forward to wipe entire tile sets. You may say this is quite strong for a character just to be able to nuke with one ability, right? Well, yes and no. Many characters in this game can run around and just mindlessly spam a few buttons and achieve over 200 kills per minute. This decree would not allow Koumei to achieve this, as her fort requires line of sight and doesn't kill particularly quickly, unlike many other nuke frames which can charge and release their nukes in very short times, many of which don't even require line of sight. It overall makes her kit less interesting as the highs are less high and the lows are less low. Everything just sort of becomes kind of middle, which kind of goes against the idea of the gambling frame. Many designs that involve gambling in many other games have a very high and low system. The highs are really high and the lows are really low, and we find that isn't the case for Koumei. Okay, the last issue with her decree system, and the one that actually inspired the augment, was the 150-second cooldown. I mentioned this earlier, but I just want to reiterate this. That is ridiculous. 150 seconds to wait for an ability to be able to be used again is way too long. And there are a couple of ways to go about this, many of which involve just adjusting her kit a little bit. For one, you could have done where the cooldown starts on cast, so for that overall minute that you're doing the decree challenge, even potentially longer, the decree is cooling down, so when it's done, you have it again, and you can just cast it. However, we want the augment route. Alright, just going forward, I want to define the augment. According to the official DE wiki, Warframe augment mods are a special category of mods. When installed, Warframe augments alter a Warframe's abilities or passives to perform additional effects, enhancing or modifying that power's utility. Each Warframe augment modifies a single specific Warframe power and can only be equipped on the Warframe that possesses that power. I want to note a couple of things about this definition that are important. The term additional effects and enhancing or modifying a power's effects. Two of things that I'm going to relate Augments do, kind of see if they meet the definition or not. And many augments do this quite well. Okay, I also want to define what an augment baby is. It's not a term I've seen thrown around much, but it was just kind of thrown out to me while I was in a Discord call with somebody. An augment baby is a warframe that relies on an augment to function effectively, or the quality of the life of the warframe is so enhanced that it is borderline impossible to run the frame without the augment equipped. More often than not, these frames have a lot of friction in the base kit, with weird anti-synergies or just underbaked abilities that don't work well on their own. Okay, I want to kind of talk about some examples as well. They all kind of have the same fundamental kit design issues. Oftentimes in designing these kits, you want to have something that will tie the whole kit together, whether it be a theme or the abilities that work so well in tandem that it's rewarding to use your abilities effectively. Unfortunately, due to the old design philosophy and short sightings in many newer frames, this isn't always the case. I want to take a look at Koumei and dive into each of her abilities, including her passive, and see how they influence her game. Every 1 minute, a random weapon slot will be chosen to inflict a random status effect for every shot. This does not include multi-shot. The duration is not moddable, and there is not a way to influence which weapon is selected. Even without a weapon equipped, that respective weapon slot still might end up with her passive. Kind of second passive more ties into her kit, being the one thing that gives her a theme and influences her gameplay in a quote-unquote meaningful way. On ability cast, Koumei rolls her 5 dice, affecting the outcome of her abilities. On low rolls under 12, some abilities even have negatives that come with them. On a roll with 3 of your dice showing 6, commonly referred to as a triple 6, Koumei's abilities gain extra effects. A normal triple 6 in real life has a 3.55% chance of occurring. However, Koumei is a dirty cheater, so she likes to run with weighted dice. Her chances of a triple 6 sit around 10%. However, the dice are defected by pseudo RNG, a system that attempts to bring some order to the randomness to feel better overall. To dumb it down, if you roll 2 to 3 rolls under 18, you have a significantly higher chance to roll a high roll and even a triple 6. Her first ability, Kumihimo. Send out a projectile that spreads up to 30 threads that inflict 1 status effect on contact with an enemy. Triple 6 gives the projectile a ton of extra damage, and each string will inflict every elemental status effect from each string. This does not include IPS damage. Omikuji. Obtain a challenge that Koumei must complete in order to obtain a random decree. On rolls under 12, you will also obtain a random harmful effect. On a triple 6, a decree is obtained without a challenge. Hold your ability button to cancel the challenge. This will still trigger the cooldown, and the cooldown will still scale up to 150 seconds. This cooldown scaling happens incrementally though. Omimori. Summon a number of charms that is equal to the number that you roll on your 5 dice. Each charm has a 50% block chance, and if triggered, a charm is consumed. On consumption of a charm, you gain health back, and if shields are active during this, it will translate into overshields. On triple 6, you become invulnerable for the duration that your charms are active. Bunraku. In a 170-degree cone, Koumei will string up her enemies and apply a random number of status effects that is equal to the number rolled by her 5 dice, as well as completely lock down any CC vulnerable enemy. On a triple 6, Bunraku will affect enemies behind you, and the enemies strung up will have status effects applied at a fixed interval for the duration of the ability. Okay, on its own, her kit is good. However, there are some issues. There is an anti-synergy between her 1 and her 4. Her 1 requires enemies to move through the strings so they can trigger an even slightly meaningful amount of status effects. Her 4 freezes enemies in place and applies a significantly higher amount of status on enemies. This also includes IPS. We also have a long scaling cooldown on her 2 that starts after the decree is completed. So if you have a decree that takes a long time to complete, or you're just unfortunate enough to have a good team that kills everything before you can get to it, it extends the cooldown even longer. There are multiple ways to fix these issues, however her new augment is not the answer. Okay, so Koumei just got her new augment, called Omikuji's Fortune, and it says, reduce Omikuji's cooldown by 4 seconds when you kill an enemy with the weapon affected by Koumei's passive. Okay, so I just got out of a 30-minute survival, and let me tell you, this augment feels incredible. However, that makes it more frustrating for me, because another question I need to ask is, why wasn't this added to the base kit? On launch, almost every person that touched Koumei agreed that her 150-second cooldown on her second ability was egregious. And to be honest with you, I'm in the same boat. During the survival mission, roughly every 30 seconds, I had another decree. That is easily 5 times faster, given that you're completing the decrees instantly, than what it was before. I gained over 40 decrees in roughly 30 minutes. That normally would have taken you upwards of 2 hours, maybe even 3 if the decree challenges are going that much slower. Now, this wasn't 40 individual different decrees, but it was 40 decrees nonetheless. I completed 40 of the decree challenges in 30 minutes. That is unheard of amount of speed prior to this update. To put it simply, it feels like a band-aid that shouldn't have to exist. This augment should have been part of the base kit in the first place. It allows extra synergy between the abilities on her kit without making her that much more broken. It feels really good to slot into the build. However, similar to other frames, I don't want it to feel necessary. The augment is so strong and makes her scale that much quicker that it feels necessary to run, which is something that we shouldn't have in the modern augment system. Alright, I have a couple of issues with Band-Aid augments. Look, I understand that the choice between using an augment or not is up to preference, and that augments require sacrificing a mod slot. And DE has gone on record many times to say that augments will never be getting their own slot, which is something I completely agree with. The beauty of modding in this game is the sacrifice you must make when choosing mods. Augments should be no different, affecting frames in a meaningful enough way to earn that slot. However, with augments like this, we are forced to make a choice between an ability that should have been a part of the frame's kit from the start, or to play an objectively worse off frame with the benefit of being able to mod with full freedom. To put it simply, it feels just shitty, and augments like this should not exist, really, in any capacity. One of the other frames I want to talk about is Gyre. Gyre is another great example of frames with Band-Aid augments. The augment mod Cathode Current is another example of unfortunate bad design. According to the wiki, Cathode Current is a Warframe augment mod for Gyre's Cathode Grace that causes enemies killed to release an additional discharge from Rotorswell and extend its duration. To understand why this is bad, let's look at Rotorswell without the augment and see why it's such a problem. Rotorswell is an ability with a long cast. To put it simply, it feels bad to play. Even if you're running a ton of casting speed, it doesn't feel good to have to sacrifice your stats to run a lot of duration to prevent casting Rotorswell often. This was such a big problem for Gyre that she was considered a mid-tier damage frame that felt awkward and clunky to play. And without the augment, she really is just that. However, the augment breathes new life into her. It's like night and day how staggering the difference is when you play her. As long as you kill enemies, your abilities stay active forever, playing off each other and making your kit just have that much more synergy. But we must ask the same question. Why wasn't this a part of the base kit? What is stopping DE from just making these augments into the base kit through kit revamps? Moving on to another frame, Ashe. In light of recent events, Ashe is getting his much overdue rework. Being one of the original frames, his design has aged like milk, requiring augments to be viable outside of his fourth ability. Alright, let's talk about Seeking Shuriken. Essentially, a free universal armor strip on key targets. Without the augment, the ability is like throwing a water balloon at a brick wall and expecting it to fall over. Back in the day, it made more sense. When spy missions were much more popular, the ability could be used in place of a gun to take out key targets, as it didn't break forms of invisibility. However, in the modern meta where each ability can do like 20 different things, it just doesn't hold up. Mind you, this is without taking into consideration other more effective forms of armor strip that don't require augments. Frames like Hildren and Necros can armor strip entire rooms. However, with even just an augment, Ashe is limited to 5 targets maximum. Ashe thrives in endless missions like Void Cascade nowadays, with easy access to invisibility and crit chance through another augment, Smokescreen. However, without the Seeking Shuriken augment, his base kit just loses a significant amount of potency, forcing you to run the augment for missions like Void Cascade. But with Ashe's retouch, we actually get an answer to the question we asked earlier. DE can implement the augments as a part of the base kit. Okay, I want to make it very clear that I'm not saying that this applies to every augment, as many open up entirely different playstyles and are well worth using if it interests you. However, there are frames that struggle from undercooked kits that are thrown under the bus and are ignored, at best given an augment to help their struggling kit. However, as stated earlier, this requires valuable mod space that can be used to affect the kit in much more meaningful ways. Okay, I want to talk about some frames that I think are actually very good with certain augments. Let's talk about Protea. Protea is already an insane frame. She gets easy access to shield gating, crowd control, auto turrets, infinite health, and energy, and an oh fuck button. To put it simply, she is loaded. Maybe even a little too loaded. However, she contains some of my favorite augments that I've had the pleasure of using. Augments that fit the official definition and then actively make her playstyle different and impact her in a meaningful way. I want to talk about Temporal Erosion. Temporal Erosion is an augment mod for Protea that causes Grenade Fan and Blaze Artillery to remove armor while Protea is in Temporal Anchor. This augment is almost perfect in my eyes, as an armor strip is something that is easily accessible via helmet, but the way it's implemented as her augment is already very useful to her two abilities that feel good on their own. It's a show that the game does have good design, and it doesn't feel completely necessary to a kit, but it does affect it in a very positive way. Okay, I also want to talk about Temporal Artillery. This is where things get really good. Take Zaku and just remove all issues with his kit. That's essentially what this augment does. Temporal Artillery is a Warframe augment mod for Protea's Blaze Artillery that causes a single artillery to follow Protea with its duration paused while Temporal Anchor is active, but it receives a cap to its maximum combo count. Paired with Temporal Erosion, Protea becomes an aimbotting, armor stripping monster, and these two augments positively affect her kit and are well worth the 2 mod slots, as it doesn't need to be patched up with mods or helmet. The last frame I want to cover is a great example, Nova, with her another 2 augments that both give her insane quality of life and alter her playstyle from an exclusive farming frame to a nuke frame. Molecular Fission. Molecular Fission is a Warframe augment mod for Nova's Molecular Prime that makes primed enemies restore null star charges when killed, and it causes null star particles to afflict Molecular Prime. With Molecular Prime being Nova's greatest ability, it's nice to give some additional benefits, giving Nova an essentially infinite 90% damage reduction as long as she's killing enemies. It also spreads Molecular Fission to any nearby enemy, which allows you to not have to recast her 1. This also allows her to be an incredible gunrunner frame, priming enemies with Molecular Prime's 200 damage vulnerability as she runs. It's a nice quality of life addition that makes her feel a lot smoother. Another mod well worth its place in limited modding space. I'm talking about Neutron Star. Neutron Star is an augment mod for Nova's Null Star that allows it to inflict heat damage, guaranteed status effect in a radius, and recasting the ability will disperse any active particles to seek out enemies before being replenished. Neutron Star's seek radius is double that of Null Star's. The augment is pure gold, turning a damage reduction ability into a nuke. Imagine if Iron Skin just started killing enemies. That is essentially what is happening here. Paired with Archon Vitality to double heat procs from the mod turns Nova into a nuke frame. Running around casting her 1 will wipe tile sets. Due to heat inherit, it can also give you overguard. And the beauty of these mods is they feel entirely optional, while still being a good and viable way to play the character. It is, in my opinion, a perfect example of what the augment should strive to be, on a frame that is both good with and without the mod. However, this doesn't discount the fact that many augments are solely being used as a band-aid, and that the player must now decide between making their frame feel good to play or having the full ability to mod their characters. Lastly, I want to talk about ways we can actually fix the issue, maybe ways to even prevent things like this from happening in the future. A world where there aren't frames that require augments to function as intended, or to iron out glaring issues that actively make some frames much worse to play. Protea and Nova are almost perfect warframes, with or without the augments. All the augments do in these cases change the playstyle enough to where it feels different, while not just feeling like a band-aid fix for characters with glaring issues. The design team should look at frames like this as examples of what to do when it comes to augments, and how to implement them as intended. Okay, how can we fix this? The easy answer would just not to release frames with anti-synergistic, messy, and not well thought out kits. One way we can do this is more playtesting, as every issue in Koumei's kit was spotted on day 1, and even those who were praising her on how good of a frame she is still admitted to these faults. However, this is a huge ask and isn't necessarily reasonable to do, and not every hit is gonna be a home run, but there are always ways we can recover those that aren't. We can start to implement augments into the base kits. This is more of a solution for frames that have existed for a very, very long time. We know this is possible due to Ash getting one of his augments implemented and changed. The issue is this will be a massive undertaking, but one that could happen over time. Coming up with new ideas just to be outsourced to community, as in taking the ideas from the forums that are good and well balanced, and changing the existing augments while implementing their old functionality. This isn't a call for all augments to be answered in this way, just those frames who feel bad, inconsistent, clunky, or just overall not as viable without their augments. The augment slot. This just isn't happening. They've already gone on record many times to say this is not happening, and even in a recent interview that happened right before Techrot Encore happened, they said it's not happening. You should just give up on this idea. The unfortunate, most likely scenario is that we're just gonna keep the status quo. The likely scenario is we're gonna keep releasing mid-frames with augments 5 months later that fix the glaring issues in the kit. Ultimately, it is up to you to decide whether or not the mod is worth taking up a slot, which in my opinion is one of the great parts of the augment system. But this comes with frustration from players having to buy the proper mod just to play the frame they want to play. Many builds and frames are very flexible and can be built without certain mods, or even use helmet to fill the holes that the modding may have left, but some unfortunate frames just don't have that freedom, and they must use an augment to be viable. Augments and the system as a whole isn't all bad, but the standouts really stand out as bad. Koumei, to me, is a character that I have been playing pretty much since I got the game. She came out right around the time I started in October, and I have put in 700 hours into the game since then. Put it simply, I'm kind of addicted to this game, and Koumei is part of the reason why. Half of my playtime, no, more than half of my playtime is spent on her. So imagine my disappointment when I look on my phone and I see that DE made an announcement and it's about a new Koumei augment. I get so excited just to read that it's a cooldown adjustment for her too. Nothing interesting. It just sucks. We need to stop implementing stuff like this, and even changing old stuff will fix so many issues with frames that people have. It would be great. Okay, I think Koumei should have just had her augment in the base kit from the start, or at least some version of it, something to reward you for using your kit properly. We could have had augments that have given great team buffs, or the freedom to choose the decrees with the addition of the curse decrees. Not an augment that makes her viable that should have just been there from the start. Other frames have had this problem while others thrive off their augments, modifying them in an impactful way while not being necessary. In my opinion, this is the original goal of the augment system. However, in many cases, it is being used as merely a band-aid fix. Want to overlook the problems in many old and new frames kits. There are many frames that should just be re-evaluated, given tiny gameplay revamps as they call it. My end goal is not to push power creep further, but to improve the quality of life of many old frames and give players more options. Not to feel the pressure of using certain mods and to be given the full freedom to tailor their favorite warframe to their liking.